Story is from Lois Lenski's Christmas Stories. How Christmas Came to Blueberry Corners, a New England Christmas. The Congregationalists in New England did not celebrate Christmas. So strong was the puritanical hold upon the early New England settlers that Christmas was banned officially for nearly 300 years. In the early days, all who tried to bring it back were fined or jailed. Not until the middle of the 19th century, when Episcopal congregations began to be established, did Christmas make a feeble comeback. Its taking over was a gradual process, for many neighborhoods did not do so until after 1900. And in the 1940s, in a rural Connecticut town, I talked to men and women who had never celebrated Christmas in their youth, and who still mildly disapproved of it, although they and their families had taken over its outward aspects. Becky and Fanny were two of the 8 children of Parson Griswold, who lived at Blueberry Corners in northwest Connecticut in 1840. There were not many pleasures in their lives, for they wore hand-me-down clothes, and the shelves of the parson's kitchen were often empty. Most of the people in town were meeting-house people. That is, they went to meeting each Sunday and listened to Parson Griswold preach. The meeting house was never called a church. Only Episcopalians had churches. A new family had come to town. Becky and Fanny talked to a new girl at school, Julie Ann Janeway, who wore beautiful clothes and went to the church at Blueberry Center. They listened with bright eyes and open mouths when Julie Ann told them about something called Christmas. Becky and Fanny had never heard the word before, and finally Becky felt she had to do something about it. "Do you have gingerbread every day, Julie Ann Janeway?" asked Becky. "With icing on it?" "Yes," said Julie Ann. "Here, you can have it. I'm sick of gingerbread." "Don't want it," replied Becky, turning her back and walking on. The two girls were walking slowly home from school. On her head, instead of a shawl, Julie Ann wore a velvet bonnet with a plume on one side. Her long coat, which was called a pelisse, had buttons all the way down the front. It was mid-December, and the snow on the road was packed hard and smooth. The farmers had broken it out with their ox teams in the early morning. The sky had a heavy, gray, sullen look, as if another snowstorm was threatening. "Just wait till Christmas comes," boasted Julie Ann. "We'll have better things than gingerbread then. We'll have plum pudding." And all the way home Julie Ann talked of some strange, mysterious thing which she called Christmas. "What's that?" asked Becky, drawing in her breath sharply. "What's Christmas?" "It's the day the Lord Jesus was born," said Julie Ann, with an important air. "It comes on the 25th of December, and we go to church to see the illumination, and we have a tree." "But Pa didn't say so," objected Becky. "Your Pa?" laughed Julie Ann. "Why should he say so? Guess he's the parson of the Ecclesiastical Society of Blueberry Corners. Guess he knows about everything." Becky drew her breath again in sharp defiance. "But he didn't say nothing about Christmas." "Oh, we don't go to meeting house," replied Julie Ann. I meant at the Episcopal Church at Blueberry Center. That's where we go. Oh, I just love Christmas, don't you?" "I never saw one. What are they like?" asked Becky. Her curiosity getting the better of her, she might well have added that she had never heard of one, but she did not. "Oh, Becky Griswold," cried Julie Ann, clapping her hands in rapture. "They're the most elegant things you ever saw." "What are?" asked Becky. "You haven't told me what you're talking about yet." "Oh, the tree and the candles and the Yule log and the presents." "How do you do it?" asked Becky soberly. Fanny and the other children crowded around to listen, their eyes open wide with expectation. "Well," said Julie Ann, "we find the most beautiful spruce tree in the woods, and we hang it all over with gold and silver apples for buds and flowers all over the branches. We hang sugar almonds, sugar plums, gilded walnuts, cinnamons, gumballs, and all kinds of sweetmeats. And all over the tree there will be 1,000 little candles to shine among the dark branches, and around the bottom all kinds of beautiful presents. Presents? What are they? Asked Becky. The children crowded closer. Why, presents, cried Julianne. Haven't you ever had any presents, Becky? Never in your life? No, said Becky slowly. What are they? Things people give to you, replied Julianne. Oh, yes, Becky said, cried Fanny eagerly. Don't you remember Mr. Butterfield the peddler gave us each a string of beads? Yes, said Becky, and I had another present too. Aunt Letticia gave me her old red flannel petticoat when it was worn out, and Ma made a meeting gown out of it. A red flannel petticoat, sniffed Julianne. I wouldn't want a worn-out petticoat, I'm sure. I mean lovely things. Oh, just everything you can think of, Becky Griswold. What? Tell us, begged the children, their eyes opening wider. Well, said Julianne, I expect I shall have a pretty doll, the prettiest doll that ever was, all dressed in grown-up clothes, and a slick cloak with quilted lining. And my little brother wants a new stick pony to gallop on. It doesn't matter what it is. Anything can come at Christmas. Oh, I wish somebody'd give me a pretty doll, cried Becky impulsively. Then she bit her lips, for well she knew they wouldn't. Suddenly, it seemed dreadful to be the parson's children. It meant being poorer than anybody else. It meant wearing heavy calfskin shoes instead of morocco buskins like Julianne's. It meant homespun gowns instead of muslin delaine or bombazette, and sunbonnets instead of gypsy bonnets. No, there were too many mouths to feed in the Parson Griswold's home. As Ma said so often, they ought to be thankful for small blessings, and surely the blessings were small enough. There would never be any Christmas in the Parsons family. Becky's eyes filled with tears. Here, take a bite of my gingerbread, please, begged Julianne. She came close, but put her arm in Becky's, and with the other hand pressed the gingerbread upon her, and Becky gulped down a bite, then tried to say, Don't want your old gingerbread, but she couldn't, for her mouth was too full, and it tasted good. Oh, so good. Don't Christmas ever come to Blueberry Corners where you live? Asked Julianne when they came to the parting of the ways. Of course, Christmas comes to our house, Becky burst out indignantly. Why should Julianne have everything? Satin aprons, gypsy bonnets, gold rings, ruffled pantalettes, and Christmas too? She was filled with sudden rage and jealousy. Of course we have Christmas. Then she turned on her heel and ran. She ran a long distance along the road before she stopped. It was as if she were running away from herself, for she knew that what she had said was not true at all, and her heart beat heavily within her. A little later, Fanny caught up with her and put her arm around her waist. Is it true? She asked, her blue eyes shining like stars. Oh, I do so want to have Christmas. If we could only have one Christmas, that would be enough. Why, Fanny Griswold, said Becky sharply, of course we can't, and you ought to know it. I could shake you for acting so silly. I only said that 'cause I didn't know what to say. We can't have Christmas. We're too poor. We didn't even have turkey on Thanksgiving, and there's never any money for new clothes. That's why we always wear hand-me-downs. I thought you knew that. I thought that's why you went to Happy Valley. Oh, said Fanny thoughtfully. If I'd only known about Christmas sooner, I'd have told Great Aunt Mehitable about that too, and she could have come for a visit and brought heaps of Christmas presents. You spoiled it all by telling her we needed so many things, scolded Becky. There's no use thinking of her. She don't even come to see us any more like she used to. It was true. Both girls knew it. Great Aunt Mehitable had not been heard from since Fanny's abrupt departure from Happy Valley. The time of her customary fall visit had passed. She had not come or sent any word. Everybody knew that she was offended, and no more help could be expected. Things were worse than before Fanny went. Mrs. Griswold and Aunt Letchey got cross whenever her name was mentioned. It was best not to speak of her, even to think of her. "Oh dear," wailed Fanny unhappily. "I do so want Christmas, so there." "You ought to have more sense, Fanny," scolded Becky. But somehow or other, Fanny would never learn sense. She would never be as practical as Becky. She kept on wishing and hoping, and at supper table that night she broke out again. "I'll be glad when Christmas comes." Her serene faith lighted up her small, thin face. Becky tried to kick her under the table with her foot, but could not reach far enough, and besides, it was too late. Ma and Aunt Letchey had both heard, and so had the rest of the family. All the brothers and little sisters whose heads and elbows showed above the rim of the long table, Benjamin, David, Polly Prue, Lucinda Jane, Sarah Ann, and even baby Matthew. They all began to stir and clamor and cry. "Oh, what is it? And what we want it too. Tell us about it, Fanny, do." "Julianne Janeway told us about it at school." Fanny's little voice rang out high and clear. "It's coming soon, on the 25th of this month." "But it's not coming here," protested Becky. She never said that it was coming here. She wished Fanny were not so stupid, for she saw by her mother's face that this was a serious matter. "Nonsense," said Mrs. Griswold emphatically. "What's the child thinking of? We're not Episcopal. That's why we don't believe in keeping those prayer book days like Christmas and Easter. It's only the Church of England that does that. They have a little church down in Blueberry Center now, I hear, but we don't keep it at the meetin' house, and that's the long and short of it." "But can't we have presents like Julianne Janeway?" wailed Fanny. "We want presents," chimed in Polly Prue and the little sisters. "Presents!" snapped Mrs. Griswold. "What be ye thinking of? Here we are all scrimping and saving and a-working our heads off just to get clothing to cover you and food to fill you up, wood enough to warm you, and you want presents?" "It's right nice custom," said Aunt Letchey quietly. "I wish we could have it." "Don't help put more notions into their heads," said Mrs. Griswold sharply. "School keeps the day same as any other. You'll be good children. Forget this nonsense and do your duty." When Parson Griswold returned from making a sick call, Ma asked him to explain. He went to his study, looked through a pile of musty books, and then his face turned sober as he spoke. The children folded their hands and listened. "Nobody knows when Christ was born, and there is nothing in the Bible to tell us when to keep Christmas," he said. "The disciples and early Christians did not keep Christmas, and no mention is made of its recognition until after the 4th century. Then there were some who said that it was on the 20th of May, which is every bit as likely as the 25th of December. It sounded like one of his long sermons in meeting. Becky and Fanny looked at each other and wondered what all his big words had to do with Julianne's tree and presents. "It was kept for many years in England," Pa went on, "but it became a celebration of boisterous revelry, in which people forgot the true meaning of Christ's birth. So, when our ancestors came to found New England 200 years ago, they gave up celebrating all the saints' days, along with many old world customs and practices which they disapproved of. They came to New England to begin all over again so that they could live better and have their children live better. Our Puritan fathers escaped from the yoke of bondage and fought hard for their liberty by prayers, toils, tears, and sacrifice in a new land. It's our duty to walk in the good old ways which they have laid down for us. So, children, do your duty, be obedient, study your catechism, say your prayers, and forget this talk of Christmas." The row of eyes around the room closed in respectful silence, and not a murmur was heard during the reading of the chapter from the Bible and the prayers which followed. But Becky could not sleep for thinking of Christmas. She had not understood all her father's statements, but she knew that the idea of Christmas, entrancing and enticing as it was, when painted in glowing colors by the words of Julianne Janeway, was somehow wrong and forbidden. Others might enjoy it, but not the Parsons family. Becky's heart sank within her. No, they could not have it, except by some miracle. She folded her hands and prayed earnestly. The days went by slowly, one after the other. Fanny was not sensible at all, and her blue eyes shone more and more like stars. Every day Becky scolded her, but she and the little sisters became more and more confident. Julianne Janeway began to talk of a red merino coat trimmed with swan's down and other unheard of things. When she asked daily, "Don't Christmas ever come to Blueberry Corners?" Becky protested vigorously, "Course it does. Guess we can have Christmas too if we want." Every night Becky prayed. On the night of the 24th, over their supper of bread and hasty pudding and applesauce, Becky saw the row of eyes of her brothers and sisters shining with bright expectancy at the thought of what would happen on the morrow. That night she prayed again for a miracle. When she awoke on Christmas morning, all her dreams faded away before the sternness of reality. She heard the thumping of clothes and the pounding barrel. It was wash day, not Christmas. Her mother's voice called her at daylight. A heavy snow had fallen the night before. Snow had drifted in through the cracks in the unplastered wall, and a great drift lay out across the bed. She gathered up the quilt and shook the snow off on the floor. Then she put it back on the blankets and tucked Fanny and Polly Prue up snugly. The room was very cold. She shivered as she pulled her clothes on. When she went down the step stairs into the kitchen, nothing was different. No miracle had happened. There were the usual chores to do: breakfast to get, cows to be milked, children's faces to wash, hair to comb, lunches to pack. "Shall I put on my meeting gown?" asked Fanny when she came down, supreme in her faith. "Don't we go to meeting on Christmas?" "Land sakes!" cried Mrs. Griswold. "Is the child crazy? Ain't she forgot that Christmas nonsense yet?" At the usual time, the children were packed off to school with their lunches, and they waded in the heavy snow up to their knees. The first thing they noticed was that Julianne Janeway was absent. Becky Griswold thought hard all morning. By noon, she had worked out a philosophy of her own. She remembered how hard she had to work, spinning shoe thread for 2 weeks, to earn her new pair of calfskin shoes. You have to work for it before you get it. Her brothers and her little sisters were waiting and trusting. Becky must make a miracle happen. At nooning, Becky put her thoughts into actions. She left the schoolhouse and started off across the field. Behind her, Fanny called frantically, and then came running up, her hair flying. "Where are you going, Becky?" she demanded. Becky's face was very solemn. "Do you want Christmas to really and truly come?" she asked. "Oh, yes," cried Fanny eagerly. "Do you think it will?" "I'm going to get Christmas for all of us," said Becky. "You must go back and say nothing." "Oh, Becky, I'm glad," said Fanny. "I just knew Christmas would come." Then she came back to her seat at the schoolroom. Becky soon left the field and went back to the main road, where walking was easier, for the road had been broken out during the morning. When she reached home, she peeped in at the back door. She had one last hope that Christmas might have arrived during her absence. But no. Aunt Letticia and Mrs. Whipple from the farm next door and Ma were spinning. The washing was done, but the kitchen was more upset than ever. She put her hands over her ears to shut out the sad, moaning wail of the spinning wheels. The mournful sound gave her a discomfort. She smelled a parsnip stew simmering in the big kettle over the fire. She hated parsnip stew. It always meant that there was not enough pork to go around, so that they had to fill up on parsnips. She pressed her hand on her stomach and thought how good a sausage, nicely browned and sizzling, would taste. It had been a long time since they had tasted one. Becky knew now that she would have to find Christmas herself. Before she reached the woodshed, she had made up her mind what she would do. She found a hatchet and hid it under her coat. How thankful she was that her mother and aunt were busy and had not seen her. Her father, too, buried among his books in the study, rarely noticed what she was what was going on unless it was brought to his attention. Becky flew down the hill again, but she did not return to school. She went to the village, and on her way she passed Julie Ann Janeway's house, a great white square mansion with green blinds, which sat snugly behind a white picket fence. She stared at it. Then suddenly there was Julianne at her side, pulling and tugging and dragging her in. Inside the house she saw a merry crowd around the table, singing and laughing and eating. In a corner of the next room she saw a tree covered with lighted candles. She gasped as she looked. It was more beautiful than anything she had seen in her life. Julianne wore a yellow silk gown with ruffles, and her hair hung over her shoulders in a shower of curls. She jumped and danced about gaily, pointing out her array of gifts. There was a pretty doll and the red merino coat that her little brother's stick pony, just as she had said. Becky held her arms crossly tightly over her thin chest to keep the hatchet under her coat from slipping. Her coat was too small for her. Her hands were bare, and her wrists showed red and raw below her sleeves. Her little head shawl was tied firmly in a knot under her chin. She stood stiffly and stared. Then she shivered and turned away. Julianne pressed a large chunk of candied gingerbread upon her, but she did not take it. "Don't Christmas ever come to Blueberry Corners?" asked Julianne, this time sympathetically. "Course it does," cried Becky as she went out the door. Down the road she flew, as fast as her thin legs would carry her. As she passed Mr. Webb's store, she stopped for a moment and pressed her nose against the glass window. She saw a fine array of sugar animals, peppermint sticks, and lozenges, but she did not linger long over the impossible. She went through the burying ground behind the meeting house, wading in deep snow over the graves of her ancestors. She stopped and looked up through the black, drooping branches of great pines. Their snowy boughs hung so low she had to stop to walk under them. They were beautiful trees, but much too large. She went on, and climbing over the big hill beyond, here she came to a pine grove, with tall sentinel pines reaching far up to touch the sky. There was very little snow among the pine needles. Walking was easier. At length she came out in a pasture where many seedling pines and spruces had sprung up. She examined the small trees carefully. One was too large, one too small, one bent or crooked. Was there one as pretty as Julianne's? At last she found a perfect tree. It was just a little taller than she was herself. Her hands had grown cold and stiff without mittens. She took the hatchet from under her coat, tied the little head shawl tighter under her chin, and began to chop. The trunk of the tree was sturdy, and the hatchet was not very sharp. She chopped as hard as she could, and her hands became warmer. The trunk was nearly ready to fall, when somehow the hatchet slipped and fell against her shoe. Becky looked down at her foot, and there in the snow, which had been white like the wool on a sheep's back, she saw a spot of bright red. She wondered how it came there. It grew larger and larger as she watched. She looked more closely, and then she saw that a gash had been cut in her new calfskin shoes, the shoes she had worked so hard to earn, which were to last until next summer. Suddenly she hid her face in her hands and burst into tears. Then she crumpled up on the ground. Some time later she roused herself and could not seem to remember what had happened. She was very cold and stiff and could scarcely move. The sun was sinking slowly behind the pine-clad hill. It must be late. Then she saw the tree lying on its side, and she remembered she must hurry and bring Christmas to the children, or they would all be disappointed. She tried to get up, but she couldn't. Her foot hurt badly, but she was determined to reach home somehow. Over the brow of the hill she saw smoke rising from a chimney. It was old Hiram Curtis's cottage, down in Cedar Hollow, a quarter of a mile away. She began to make her way toward it, crawling inch by inch on her knees. Becky never knew how she got there, but she did. She made her way over the snowy hill, crawled over several stone walls, under a rail fence, and finally came in sight of old Hiram's woodpile. Fortunately, he was there, picking up an armful of wood. He dropped it hastily and came forward limping, for he was crippled. When he heard her feeble voice calling, "Do tell, child," he exclaimed, scratching his head in perplexity. "Well, if it ain't Becky Griswold, the parson's daughter, sure I'm alive, a-crawling on all fours. Whatever ails you? Oh, goodness gracious, I must call Mirandy. She'll know what to do. Just you wait now." He limped down the hill as quickly as he could, and in a few moments Mirandy came with a wooden sled. The two old people helped Becky on and dragged her to the back door. Then they carried her into a bed in the corner of the kitchen. And old Mirandy bandaged up her foot and treated her hands and feet for frostbite. "I'd like to take you home, Becky," said old Hiram. "Dark's a-comin' on, and the parson'll be worried, I haven't a doubt." Suddenly Becky remembered the tree and the hatchet which she had left on the hillside. She told old Hiram, and he went at once to fetch them. By the time he returned, it was dark. The mountain road which led to their cottage had not been broken out, and he had only one poor lame horse. He could not take her home. Becky's foot began to pain her, and finally she fell into a fitful sleep. That afternoon, when the children were home from school, Becky was not with them. Mrs. Griswold questioned Fanny. "She went to get our Christmas. She went to get our Christmas," said Fanny over and over again, her eyes full of tears. "Still talking foolishness," cried Mrs. Griswold. "When will that child learn to be sensible?" By nightfall, Becky's mother was alarmed and anxious. The younger children were put to bed whimpering. When Parson Griswold returned late in the evening, he too was alarmed. He walked all over the near neighbors to make inquiries, but no one had seen Becky. Several men went to the village to ask about her, but returned without news of any kind. Mrs. Griswold sat up all night, but Becky did not come. The next morning, Fanny continued to insist. She went to get our Christmas, so Parson Griswold stopped in at the Janeway house. There Julianne and Mrs. Janeway told him of Becky's visit on the previous day, but the incident threw no light on her present whereabouts. He left to join the other searchers. Word had spread like wildfire through the little community that Becky Griswold was missing. The meeting house bell had rung, and search party set out at once to scour the woods and hillsides. After Parson Griswold left the Janeway house, Julianne began to cry. "Oh, Mother," she wailed, "it's all my fault. I was so selfish. I bragged about Christmas all the time and about all the things I was going to get. It was all my fault that she's lost." Mrs. Janeway took her repentant daughter in her arms and listened in silence. Becky said that she never had a tree and never had a present except a string of cheap glass beads and a hand-me-down petticoat in her whole life. Julie went on in distress. "Oh, Mother, let's make Christmas all ready for Becky to see when she comes back. I'm sure we'll find her. Aren't you?" She wanted Christmas so much, and so did Fanny. At the parsonage, Mrs. Griswold met many visitors at the door. Fresh hope arising with each arrival. "Have you seen her? Have you seen Becky?" she cried over and over. Then, frantic, she fell back again in despair. "Oh, they'll never find her. She's lost on the mountain. She was out in the snow all night. Oh, Becky, my child, my child." She threw her apron over her head and sobbed. "Don't, Ma, please," said Fanny. "She'll come, Ma. I know she will. She's just gone to get us Christmas." Fanny was the only sensible one now, the only one who did not cry. Her faith never wavered for an instant. She kept her mother and aunt and all the children quiet in her faith in Becky's return. When Mrs. Janeway and Julianne appeared at the door, bearing in their arms Julie's beautiful tree and the host of presents, Mrs. Griswold sniffed. "Christmas nonsense. We don't hold to that. That's what caused all the trouble." But she could not refuse them entrance. The other neighbor women crowded around to see and hear when Julianne and her mother explained. They were all meeting-house people and had never heard about Christmas, but the idea appealed to them, worn and anxious with worry and waiting. It gave them something to do. Then, too, they had seen the empty shelves of their parson's kitchen, and they were ashamed. Quickly the word passed from one to the other. One by one they went home, to return again with cakes and gingerbread hams, sides of bacon, pots of beans, baskets of apples, potatoes, groceries, jugs of cider, blankets, clothing, and an assortment of sweets from Mr. Webb's store. Christmas Day had passed, and on the following afternoon, Becky still lay abed at the little Curtis cottage. A deep cold had settled in on her chest, and all night she had been feverish. Old Aunt Mirandy sat by her bed and held her hand. There, don't see move, she said comfortingly. She got up and brewed a steaming bowl of thoroughwort tea. Just take a drink of this, child, she coaxed. It'll hearten you considerable. Becky sat up and drank dutifully. Hiram's gone to get a bobsled and team from Eddie Wheeler, the old woman went on. Eddie was here this morning and told us the whole town's out searching for the parson's daughter. Think of that, now. See how they missed you, dearie? We aim to get you home 'fore nightfall, and the ride won't hurt you a mite. A half-hour later the bobsled came, and with it several men. They placed an old mattress on the sled, and Becky was moved onto it carefully and covered with blankets and bearskin. Old Hiram fastened her pine tree up in front, and the sight of its green waving branches gave her comfort. She waved her hand to the old couple by the door as the oxen began to move. On the way home, Becky was surprised to hear bells ringing and to see people walking along beside the sled and behind it. Becky wondered what was the matter. Her chest was so tight she could not cough or speak aloud, and her foot pained badly. As the procession drew up to the parsonage, she saw that there were people there too. "The Lord be praised!" cried Parson Griswold and his wife as they rushed out the door. "Oh, Ma," said Becky hoarsely, "I didn't mean to cause you trouble. I only wanted to get a little tree for us, but I guess I catched a bad cold." There, child," said Mrs. Griswold. "It's all right. Oh, how thankful we are to get you back again." Becky was carried indoors by willing hands and put to bed in the north chamber. There she rested a while, happy and content to be at home again, and then slept a little. It was evening when she opened her eyes again. Beside her stood a little green spruce tree without trimming of any kind, plain and unassuming as it grew in the woods. She reached out her hand and touched the needles tenderly. Then she looked up, and at the foot of the bed she saw another tree, laden with gold and silver apples, sugar almonds, gilded walnuts, cinnamons, and gumballs. Through its dark branches gleamed the light of many candles, and on the table beneath was piled an array of presents, among them a pretty doll and a red merino coat. There were many other things as well, enough for every one of Becky's brothers and sisters, and Becky saw all their heads crowding eagerly about the tree and heard their delighted exclamations. She felt a deep peace in her heart. Parson Griswold came and sat by her bedside, and the children hushed their voices and listened as he read the story of the birth of Christ from the Bible, and then prayed from a heart overflowing with gratitude. Becky was surprised to see the faces of neighbors peering around the bed, and the Whipples, Aunt Ruth Hodges, and Sally, and Mr. Webb, and Mrs. Cynthia Hawks, and Dan Russell, and others. She was surprised to see most of the women wipe tears from their eyes, and Aunt Letticia smiled happily. Then Julianne Janeway came to her bedside and put the lovely doll in her arms, and murmured something about being sorry. "Oh, is it for me?" said Becky. "I never thought I would have one for myself." "Yes, it's for you, to keep for always," said Julianne, with a radiant smile. Then she turned and slipped away. Becky could not understand what had happened. It was all very strange and too good to be true. It must be a miracle, the miracle she had prayed for so hard. "Did Christmas come after all?" she asked. "Yes, child," said her father, "because you brought it. You have shown us the true spirit of Christmas by thinking of others more than yourself. From this time on, we shall have Christmas every year, for we truly need it. So Christmas came to Blueberry Corners after all, said Becky softly. I knew it would, said Fanny. Her eyes shone like stars.